May 21st board meeting to order. First on the agenda will be the pledge, led not by board vice chair. Thank you, Mr. Young. Any questions on the agenda? Any questions on the consent agenda? Okay. You want to wait and do the recognition tomorrow? Thursday?
We can do that.
Okay. We'll move on to number 8 then.
All right, number 8, facilities, tab found on tab 2. Principal Tijuana Hatchett has requested permission to rework existing restrooms in the football field house. The scope of the work will be as described in the letter from Dow Smith Construction and his estimated cost of $15,000. The funding source is a donation commitment from Mr. Dow Smith. This request is at no cost to the school board. Engineering and Construction has reviewed this request and approves the project.
Any questions on that? Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Okay. 8B.
All right, 8B is the Highway 96 city property. If Mr. Lee, come on up, kind of go over his findings.
Good evening to everyone. We've spent the last few weeks, like we discussed, doing our due diligence on the property out on Highway 96 that the city of Murfreesboro owns. We've spent 3 different trips out there with various engineering firms and consultants and that sort of thing. And I will not bore you with the 3 reports that I have that are close to 300 pages, but I've kind of condensed them down to a couple of highlights for you all tonight, a couple of things I'd like to go over. First couple of things, where we started with this property, we did a history of the hydrology of the area, because we all know that that seems to be a high area where there's a lot of confrontation, a lot of conversation about the water that goes over on some of the neighborhoods. So first thing we need to understand is what's going on and kind of why it's going. You'll notice in the first map that we show, this is from 1942. There's the blue stream that goes across the property that we're looking at. That stream goes to just off our property, and then it just kind of stops. Bodies of water don't just stop. They either intersect another body of water, they intersect a lake or stream, or they actually go underground. Which is fairly normal in this part of the country. But that's the map from 1942. The next map is 1957. That stream is no longer shown on the map, but there's a couple of red dots on the parcel of property that we're looking at. That's about where the 2 ponds are that we're looking that are located on our property. And all these other red dots to the north of the property are either open or closed. We call them depressions or karst features or sinkholes. So a lot of the water is running, and then it's going into these sinkholes and traveling that way onto the river. The next map is the 2019 map. If you'll notice, a lot of those red dots are gone. They're no longer noted on the map. It does show potential for underground water coming from our parcel and also leaving our parcel. So then that's not unusual or was not expected based on what we saw with the wetlands and the stream, and because the stream is still there. Next is the 2010 flood map. Everything in blue is where the high water marks for the 2010 flood that everybody's familiar with. A lot of this came from surface, but it also came from the lakes and the rivers got full, and the underground stream systems in Rutherford County got full and began to discharge out of sinkholes. Instead of taking on water, they were actually pushing water back. So people that had water, sinkholes on their property and had water for years going in them had fountains for a short period of time. So that's a source of that. The next map I want to show you is a drawing, try and help us understand the topography a little bit area there. We went in, and the yellow is 610. That's kind of a high ground. We're a little bit above that on our property, but that's kind of a known feature. The pink is less than that. It's a 600. So if you can see from our property, the property that we're looking at to 840, pretty good distance, but there's only 20 feet difference in elevation from 620 to 600. And that's where, when they built 840, they knew there was an issue, and they actually cut a relief channel in this area here underneath 840 to let this water go. The rest of the water goes northeast back toward 24. So that's, and you see that most of the property we're looking at is in between those two pieces. Some things that we pulled from our first geological survey that we did, that's the next couple of pages. Site conditions, nothing that we do not see. What is called page 6, geological condition, it's a Ridley limestone formation. That's very typical for Rutherford County. We have that a lot on a number of our sites. Experience in the Murfreesboro area indicates the Ridley limestone formation is susceptible to solution weathering and sinkhole developments. There were several sinkholes on site during the observation. Sinkholes to continue in the Murfreesboro area is a moderate risk. On top of the rock, you get a medium, what we call a brown fatty clay. That's where the rock over time begins to deteriorate, and that's what it turns into, is a brown fatty clay. There again, very typical for Rutherford County, nothing there. We brought in, then they began to do the borings. These initial borings were based on just going to rock refusal, which is fairly typical. The borings were to refusal. Page 10, there are a couple of things I wanted to bring out there. One of the karst features, it said, risk of future sinkhole development at this site are greater than typical. This geologist has worked for us the entire 13 years that I've been here, so he's done the borings on every site. So he brought that up to say, I've done a lot of work for you guys. It's nothing uncommon for Murfreesboro, but there again, a little more risk here. Eliminating the risk of future sinkhole development on any piece of property is not practical. A little bit more about high plastic clays. There again, nothing we haven't dealt with before. The next thing you see, which I found pretty interesting doing through this, and y'all may not, there's been a lot of people that have done dye test throughout this end of Snail Shell Cave, underneath Rutherford County. There's a professor at MTSU that's done an extensive amount of dye testing, and some of the gentlemen that have been working with us have also done this. And if you'll notice, the purple square is our property. Where the relief cut in 840 is kind of right through here. But all that water is going across land and then going underground. That's what each one of these green arrows is where water goes down, and then where the dye came out, comes back out of the ground. And it's almost like we're at the dividing point with this piece of property, and then you have all of this going north, east, and all of this going northwest. So I found a lot of that pretty interesting. The next slide you will see is basically where we did all of our borings. We spent a lot of time inside the building footprint of the original, what we proposed as the layout. This would have been the middle school, and this was the proposed high school. That was prior to having done surveys, getting accurate on-the-ground surveys. That's where we thought we could maximize the property. We also show the gas pipeline. We have a lot of information from Colonial. It's okay to put parking lots and that sort of thing over their pipeline. You can't put any structure. You can't have any light poles. There's things that we could work with. You can cross it with utilities, water, sewer, storm, but you have to cross at 90-degree angles. There again, nothing that we found out of line with what we normally do. The next slide is basically what we were showing as usable acreage for the property. It comes up with 83 total usable acres. The 50 acres is what I call the high ground. 20 acres where the middle school was going, 7 acres in the back, 6 acres there in the front. Basically a total of 83 usable acres. To build a high school and a middle school, that's right on the number, and that's if you have sewer. So we would have utilized all of these 4 pieces and then connected them together with roadway. The next slide is a quick coloration of the elevation banding. The green is the high, the red is the low. This is done with aerial survey. There again, showing the same things that we had been seeing before. The next slide is after we got our survey back, actual on-the-ground survey back, and then you begin to divide the property into segments. Which way is each segment's water flowing? And that helps you to better determine the location for your structures. What we see is about half of the 50 acres goes west, leaves the property to the west. The other usable acreage where we had the middle school leaves the property almost going due north. Doesn't go toward the subdivision. This water for this piece of property is going north and it's going west. I also found that fairly interesting after we got the survey data. Now, the stream that goes through here that was shown in 1947 and then disappeared and then came back in some later years, which collects the water from the property across the road. That stream crosses this property, and when it gets somewhere along in here, it disappears. But it doesn't go underground. So I say that to say if we were to potentially purchase this piece and develop this piece of property, that we would not negatively impact the subdivision, that our water from this area is going north and going south. We could maintain it. We could handle it. But before we jump to that conclusion, let's go a little bit further. The next slide, there again, shows the location that we had originally proposed for the high school and the middle school. Based on what we found with the survey and which way the water is actually flowing, the next slide would be the actual best location for the high school and the middle school. Because this area, the water is going this way. We kept the arrows there, so you always try and keep your detention ponds to the low side. Water wants to run downhill, so we want to use the topography to our advantage as best we can. So we would want to utilize this side for our detention ponds. We would want to use across the back for our detention ponds. When we do that, we find that the two facilities no longer fit. This building is actually off the property, and the parking lots are off the property, and it becomes more problematic to work with the gas line for a high school and a middle school. So I asked our designers, could we get a middle school and an elementary on this site and stay away from this area? what the next slide that you see shows is that we could get a middle school and an elementary side by side on the south side of the gas line. We could still potentially utilize the area to the north for playing ball fields, and I'll get to why I say that in just a second. But these two schools will fit in the front. We show another slide. There again, same thing. It's more shown with the hydrology. The darker is the higher, the blue is the lower. There again, showing where we would want to locate our detention ponds and areas that we would like to stay away from. When we did our original geographic study and drilled down to rock, there were some things that our engineers noticed, what they call closed depressions. A lot of times a closed depression in our area becomes a farm pond, not very deep. Some people call them gopher holes. But we had a few in this area where the middle school was that they wanted to do, they just weren't real comfortable saying, I feel good about you building a building back here. So I sent them back and did borings that we typically don't do. It's called a rock boring. Typically, we drill to get an indication of what type of material is from the ground down and what is the elevation of the rock. A lot of times we don't drill down into the rock, which if we had done that at Rocky Fork Elementary, we would have found the problem that we had. So having learned from that situation, I said, I'm going to go a step further to vet this property to make sure what we see. And what we found near those closed depressions, and a couple of things, John, if you'll go 2 slides up, that's our original, go ahead, no, you're going the right way. This was the first one was the original borings where we just went down to rock. This one, back up, stop, right there. This one is where we actually drilled down into the rock to see what we could see. The first portion from boring RP1 to RP20 was in the originally proposed high school site. RP21 down to RP45 was in the middle school site. What I want to bring to your attention is there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 6 or 7 of these that are highlighted. We'll look at RP23 first. Generally competent rock from 5 feet to 13 feet, but from 13 to 15 feet, there's a void. That means there's no material there. It means there's water running through there typically. Boring number 28, generally competent rock 9 to 16 feet, but there's a void from 16 feet to 30 feet. Now, in Rutherford County, we've developed some pretty ingenious ways to fill in these cracks. Pressure grouting. There's a number of things that you can do to mitigate these where you can still build on it, but they're very expensive. They're again adding to our per acreage cost per square foot. Therefore, I would not, that's when we began to look at alternatives to get 2 buildings on the property. So, based on the hydrology, based on everything that we've looked at, based on doing these extra borings, my findings are the facts, not mine. The facts have led us to the conclusion that this property is not suitable for us for a middle school and a high school, which is what we were originally contracted to do. Now, it could potentially hold a middle school and an elementary. But do we need 154 acres to do that?
What do we need?
75 to 80.
And that would be on the west portion of the land, right?
Yes, sir.
West half of it, practically.
For all, yes, sir.
Well, We don't need 75 acres to keep up for the next 50 years.
A lot of it's wetlands, yes, sir. There's still 35 to 40 acres of this property that you, based on the wetland designation, you can mow it, you can let kids run on it, you could potentially maybe put a ball field on it, not a permanent one, but like a practice field. But you're not going to be able to do much with it.
If I understood you right, did you say if you built something on these, on this particular 83 acres, you're not going to contribute to any problems around there?
No, sir, I don't believe so. We can build volumetric detention areas and continue to send that water to the west or to the northwest, which is its natural flow today, which is away from the subdivision. Now, could it snake around once it gets off that property? I'd say maybe a little bit of it does go back that way, but the biggest problem for the subdivision is coming across the property. It's the way the water flows. It has nowhere to go. Once it leaves this property on the east side, it has nowhere to go.
But it wasn't planned from the get-go, more or less.
I cannot speak to what was planned prior to that, but that stream stops. It doesn't go anywhere. And that stream's feeding across, picking up water from across the road. There's a big box culvert coming underneath the road. That stream stops somewhere once it, within a short distance of leaving the proposed property that we're looking at.
It's not going into the ground.
No, sir.
Where's it going?
It's going through the neighborhood right now.
Okay.
And then eventually it's getting back in a stream or going underground and getting onto the river.
I think I may already know the answer to this, but is there any other options out there for 75 to 80 acres?
There's 7 acres. You mean other pieces of property? I'm still riding on the weekends. I'm still looking. We've said it in this body a number of times. Mr. Spurlock and I've said it up at the courthouse in health and ed and in the full meeting. If anybody's got any property, bring it to us. Now, we have had a couple of developers that have brought us pieces that are further out. Took Mr. Estes and we looked at one back in the fall. Beautiful piece of property. The problem is it's further out than this one is. And if you get further out, you got to have dirt to put your own sewer system in, because this is about as far out as I would recommend going to be able to justify the cost. You're looking at probably $1 million to get a sanitary sewer back. But for a 2-school system, if you built your own, you're probably in pretty close to the same dollar figure. So if you can stay there, then you're okay. But much further out than this, you can't justify coming back to town to tie into the city, and you would then need enough dirt to build your own sewer system. And based on all the drawings that I've been able to get from the county and the city from this point forward, there's not much, if anything, left out there with enough dirt on that property to be able to build a sewer system. So the option then is to come back toward town. But I've yet to have anybody bring us a piece of property.
The buildings that we would be considering for this property, are they 2-story or one single story?
I've based this layout based on 1 story. We've built a couple of 2-story elementaries.
That's where we get in issues with a 2-story elementary on your early elementary. Generally that's where you're going to have the most of your volume. And if we put them up top, that's a problem going down the stairs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can see it with elementary. I didn't know about middle school.
We have not built a 2-story middle school. We have toyed with the idea of it. We've got some preliminary designs, but we have not gone that far. Out of 165,000 square feet, we could probably get about 50, maybe somewhere between 40 and 50 on a second floor. An acre, acre and a half of ground. And so far, the cost for going up has been more than what we've been paying for an acre of ground. It's been cheaper for us to stay one story. Now, if we were to get into a situation where we were paying $60,000 an acre or up, then I think we would want to look long and hard at two-story. But if we can stay in the 35 to 40, which is where we've been staying, we're better off with the one-story than we are with the two, from a cost perspective. And I think we found after having a couple of them that we're better off from an elementary standpoint to have it all on the ground.
I'll tell you from everything that's on Facebook, constituents are always mad that we don't do multiple stories. And what little I know about it is it's not necessarily saving any money to go up. And it's, once you get past that second level. So if you can expand on that a little bit so we can put that out on Facebook or something, because that's always a point of contention. Because they constantly complain about us doing one story. I get it for the elementary kids. I do, because you have a situation and you need to get them out of the building. It's going to be difficult when you have multiple floors, regardless fire or whatever. So can you expand just a little bit on that?
On the
Multi-levels?
The basic difference, you do save roof space. But as far as the rest of your facility, the cost is the same. The walls, the glass, the paper, the carpet, VCT, it doesn't matter whether it's on the first floor or the second floor, it's all the same. Where you start running into cost is as you build your structure. If I'm building this slab, as we call a slab on grade, the majority of the electrical rough end for this ground floor is going to be under the slab. It's cheap. It's easy to run. We can run the conduit in the rock. It's very easy to run. Doesn't take up ceiling space, doesn't take a lot of man labor. I can use a lesser material cost, PVC, under the slab. And then once you turn up out of the slab, you use rigid conduit or EMT. On a second floor, everything's overhead. Your slab is shallow enough that you can't get your conduit in it. So your electrical cost is right there is more than double. The other thing is, when I'm laying brick or block, the first 4 feet, I'm on the ground, and then after that, you only have to have an 8-foot section of scaffold to lay up 12 feet. To go up another 16, 18 feet, you keep building scaffold. The cost from a guy picking up a brick and handing it to you, now I've got to have a piece of equipment to get that brick to the second floor so that that guy can hand it to the... So your labor cost on a second level is exponential.
And
More time?
That touch something.
Yes, the more
multiple
cost there
times,
is.
the more cost
Yes.
it is.
So
Jumping in
that's the basics, yes, sir.
Real quick, one of the things you'll see over in Williamson County, you do see that, but when you look at the cost per acre compared to what we're paying, it's not even close.
They're paying 70 plus per acre. Now, when it comes to paying 70 plus per acre, then yeah, we're gonna need to look at it seriously to go to a two-story.
So, Mr. Lee, if I'm hearing you correctly, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the multiple stories, really the only economy or savings that are recognized are from not having to use as much acreage.
You save a little bit in
Not
your
in the
roof
construction.
because you don't have 2 buildings under roof. So if it's all, like a two-story house, if the floors are stacked, what I call a salt box house, if the floors are exactly the same, you've saved half the roof cost
Right.
versus 2-story versus 1. So when you stack it, yes, we do save some roof cost, but the other added costs are more than what we save on the roof. The only thing we're saving is roof, because on your 2-story home, everything else is the same except for your roof. So any additional square footage that we stack, we save that square footage of roof. But our additional cost to get to that second floor in commercial typically far outweighs the savings for the roof.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. We see growth, obviously, in our community. Is there a built-in growth plan for this property where if we needed to add additional, we could grow on this property, or is this what it's going to be?
You could grow with an annex on this property. we've shown that they'll fit. We would probably play with the location a little bit, but because the engineers weren't tasked with looking at a middle school, elementary on 75 acres. They were tasked with a middle school, high school on a, so I did that just for my benefit. Will it fit? Will it work better? I think yes, it would, and yes, it would work.
Could you grow out, I mean, could you put the footprint out like we discussed?
Like we've done at Tan Oaks, yes, sir, I would do that. It would be the expansion, the new prototype that has expansion built into the elementary and the middle, yes, sir.
Anyone else? Any more questions on that?
I guess I do have a question. I don't know if we're at that point yet, but I've got, if we only need 75, and maybe this is the tough part of the conversation, if we only need 75, we were originally purchasing, what was the acreage on it?
154.
So we're not going to go with 154. What does that look like? I mean, I don't think that I could support, in our financial position right now, doing much more than what we would actually need. So what are some of the options here? Whoever's having that conversation.
That's where I tried to go. And so here, my opinion, you all have 3 options that I see. Option number 1 is to go back to the city and say, it doesn't work for what we want. We're not interested in the property at all. We walk away. Because of the things that we found here are going to deter us where we cannot build those 2 buildings, high school and middle school. That's option number 1, and we walk away from the land completely, and we're back at hunting and looking, and that's option 1. Option 2 would be to go back to the city and say, it doesn't work for us based on this, but we would be interested in purchasing 75 to 80 acres, and if they were, what would your price be? And go back and negotiate through it again and determine whether you want to go that route or not. But the first thing you have to decide is, are you okay with going to a middle school elementary? Because originally it was a middle school, high school. Now, we have a need in this area for a middle school and an elementary. Do not get me wrong. That's why I went ahead and looked to see if it would work, because we do have a serious need there. So that would be option number 2. Now, if the city is unwilling to negotiate, or their negotiations are not to your liking, you still walk away. And I guess option 3 would be, and Mr. Estes has already kind of alluded to it, he's not interested in mowing 75 acres for the next whatever, is would they reduce the price to a number that's basically something that we would say is palatable for a 2-school site, and then we look at, is there potential, and there's a few acreages over there, there's 5 or 6 acres that maybe we can't use, but maybe the city can use for a future ambulance or a fire hall. I mean, there's 6 acres on the road where the little brick house is that shows in these maps. It's pretty good ground. So to say that the rest of it is totally unusable is not necessarily completely accurate, but is it needed for us for an elementary and a middle school? And the answer is no.
So it's not usable for our needs, but it could be usable for somebody else's needs?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And back to the point about the negotiation, we already have the appraisals on this property, so we already know what they're worth and what we offered. So when you say negotiation, what are we really talking about there?
Well, I'm not a real estate man. Mr. Reed would probably, he's a lawyer, he'd have to get in there. In my opinion, it's not worth, it's not worth what it's valued at to us.
What,
now,
refresh my memory, what did the appraisal come in? Because I know the appraisal came in $200,000
around
lower
20, and I'm going off memory, it's 27 and some change.
per acre.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So, and I'm talking out loud. Say they took the 75 that is not good, necessarily it's wetlands, and then there's some of it that's going to flood and that we wouldn't do anything with. I don't know, say they came back and said, we'll sell you that. If you'll take it all, we'll discount that to 10 and you pay the full price for the 75 that you're going to get. Is that a good deal or not a good deal? I mean, I don't, it would be up to you all to decide which direction you instruct us to go, or instruct me to go, or instruct Mr. Reed to go.
I'm not a real estate person either, but I would think, based on these findings, that the appraisal that was done initially is kind of moot at this point anyway.
Well, it's accurate based on the going rate for similar type property. Is it worth it to us, knowing what we know now? Is it worth that? No. I would agree. You're 100% correct. It's not.
So, if I may, I have another question. So, when we initially started planning this, the priority for the schools was a high school and a middle school. So, we hadn't even discussed putting an elementary school on this property. So, if we did this, what are we going to do about the high school that, at least at that point, in our estimation or decision-making process, was more important than the elementary school?
I think we were looking at a 3-school complex. were we not?
That's what we were originally looking for, was 3 schools, and once we figured this out, that we said we couldn't get 3. So we elected, and I guess because they are larger footprints, was the high school, middle school. Just because of the acreage, the size.
You haven't come across any other large tracts?
No, sir, I have not. Made some phone calls, looked at some nice farms.
We know we need the land out there. We need a middle school quick. We've already done the testing. We've invested a lot of time and money here, and I appreciate y'all's due diligence on this. Y'all worked hard, I know. I hate to see us throw this thing completely out the window. I'd like to see if we could negotiate the price, see what they would come back as far as the city, and see if that's something we'd be interested in.
Mr. Lee, if I may. So what, all this due diligence, the work that's been done, what have we spent so far?
Right at $60,000.
60?
Yes, ma'am. We typically spend on any piece of property that we look at somewhere between 25 and 35. We have gone a little extra this time after the Rocky Fork Elementary. I was instructed by this board on more than one occasion to not come back in here with that again.
Right.
So I've made sure that I'm not. I learned well.
Mr. Lee, does that $60,000 include what the city was wanting us to pay? Or is that in addition? Because it was my understanding, now I refresh my memory, when we first started talking to them, they wanted us to make them whole on the testing that they had already done.
And we utilized that testing, but we went in addition to that, design, because their design, their testing was based on they were going to build nothing but ball fields. So ball fields and building buildings are, so we took their information, and it was useful, do not get me wrong. It probably saved us whatever we paid then, or whatever we're going to pay, if we were to buy it. We would have spent that money as well.
Oh, and
So
my
we've
question
spent,
is it-
60 in addition to whatever
20,
they spent.
25,
It was
30.
25 to 30, yes.
Yeah, that's just what I wanted to know.
Yes, it's in
Trust me,
addition.
it's better for us to do our due diligence.
Yes, it's in addition to. You're correct.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to get a good number on that.
Yes, ma'am.
I think I really agree with Mr. Young and with Ms. Johnson on a couple of things. I just despise the idea that we're going to pay, what was it, $27,500
Rough number, yes, sir.
for 70 some odd acres, whatever it is, that we know we can't use, ever, maybe. and the same price for what we're going to put 2 schools on. Now, the solution to that, and I'm not sure there is one, but the solution to that, I think, is what Mr. Young said. I'd kind of like to know if, first of all, if they would sell us 83 acres at $27.5, and that would, and I would be in agreement with that, I think, for middle school and elementary. But then, what would their price be on the rest of the acreage, which evidently they don't want at all? Evidently, they don't want this piece of property at all. But we can't use it. So I don't quite understand that. In order to get the acreage that we need, we're going to pay $27.5 for 80 acres, whatever it is, that we don't need at all. Which seems like, well, I think that would be a very difficult thing to face the taxpayer with that and say, well, you know, we purchased this property and we know we're not going to be able to use it. That just somehow it doesn't seem right to me. Now, it doesn't make any difference to me. Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. It doesn't make any difference to me who owns the property. I don't care if the city of Murfreesboro owns it or I don't care. But evidently, whoever owns it now, and I understand that is the city of Murfreesboro, evidently they got stuck with a bad deal. I'm sorry, but don't push it off on us. I don't. In some cases, it's the same taxpayer. The city of Murfreesboro's taxpayers are going to have to pay their share of this too. But anyway, I'd like to see if we could maybe negotiate with them on different prices. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't vote for it if we have to do it, because we need land so badly, and we've got to build schools, and we all know that. But I just am reluctant to purchase property really at any price, but some reduced price if we can't use the property for some educational purpose.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. It'll give us all something to think about between now and Thursday. All right, let's see, 9, is that where we are?
Yeah, number 9, ESL District-Wide Facilitator Position funded by Title III funds, found on tab 3. ESL District-Wide Facilitator Position funded, terms of employment to 20 days as a teacher contract funded by Title III funds. Qualifications: they must hold a valid Tennessee teacher's license with an ESL endorsement, a minimum master's degree, and a successful teaching experience, minimum of 5 years. They would report to the immediate supervisor or coordinator of English as a second language, and under the direction of the ESL coordinator, provide assistance to the teachers and school administrators to improve the instruction for our ELL learners. Complete job description is attached. I think we currently have, how many now, Mr. Gullion? 1, is that correct? And this would be their second one. Do you know by any chance how much in our ESL population grew? Could you come up and kind of?
Evening, board members. So I talked to Ms. Hall this morning, and I'm not sure exactly the percentage that we grew, but she is expecting somewhere close to 5,000 students that'll be served in ESL, and that's direct serves, T1s and T2s for next school year.
Sounds pretty significant. You got it, Mr. Coleman?
As of last year, we ended the year with 4,432, and on February 19th, we had 4,888 for an increase of 456, so over 10% of our student population.
We definitely need another facilitator.
She also mentioned 140 ESL teachers for next year that'll be supported with this.
Gotcha. Wow.
Any questions on that? Really surprised it being that low.
Mm-hmm. It's growing, and more so in the northern end of the county. That's where primarily.
Okay, number 10.
Yeah, I'll look if we can skip to number 11. Number 11 kind of falls along the line with the ESL Specialist.
Rutherford County currently funds one ESL specialist position that works with all of our schools. The specialist supports instructional work for the ESL teachers in all of our 48 schools for the 2020-2021 school year. Rutherford County would like to use Title II funds, add one additional ESL specialist to maximize their effectiveness working with and providing training for teachers and administrators in these 48 schools. So once again, it goes to volume as in terms of what one person is currently doing.
Okay, any questions on that? All right, we'll go back to number 10.
All right, number 10 is an update of job description, general education student services. Currently, this position is serving, I think, two major areas. If I'm not mistaken, 504 and in, what was it again? Yeah, okay, yeah, risk assessment for our students. So what we're requesting to do is move one position. I think is going to go over into safe schools as we look at this next item on our board agenda. One is going to be coming out of risk assessment for students that will go over into the safe schools, and this position right here would stay 504 completely. And if all you know, 504 is very heavy, and this, by separating these duties, we're going to be able to provide more effectiveness in terms of meeting the needs. A 504 meeting, for those you don't know, is just like an IEP meeting. And it's very, I think Ms. Page can tell you, it can get very contentious, and it can, there's opportunities for litigation that come out of those if they don't work right.
Okay, any questions on that? Okay, number 12.
Our number 12 is following up on what we discussed on the supplementary student service liaison. Rutherford County Schools currently funds one student service 504 liaison position that works with all schools. This position supports the work of teachers and counselors who work with student 504 plans in all 48 schools. And for the 2020-21 school year, Rutherford County Schools would like to use Title IV funds, safe and healthy, to add one additional student service 504 liaison position to maximize their effectiveness working with teachers and counselors in the 48 buildings.
Okay, any questions on that? All right, we'll move on to number 13.
Our number 13, I want to tip my hat to our instructional department. When I first took over as director of schools, I think we were probably paying in excess over $300,000 for this summer conference. It's a very important conference because it provides opportunity for our teachers to get PD. I think it's 2 days of PD during the summer conference, and we had pretty good success with it. However, upon evaluating it and looking at some of the things that SDE, the vendor that was providing us, we felt like that this was a little bit out of our range in terms of what we're paying, and we weren't getting the return on our investment. So we did look at it and scaled it back, and we're even going to scale it back even more come the next fiscal year. But what we have here on this one, it kind of changed with what we've been facing with this pandemic. The Instructional Department is requesting the approval of a contract with staff development for SDE for the annual Teacher Professional Development Conference. SDE will contract national presenters, design and maintain a website with registration, purchase, and Zoom license. Staff and virtual session moderators manage online handouts for a 2-day virtual conference for the Rutherford County District. SDE will gather attendee analytics records for us. In addition, SDE will provide online access for our Rutherford County schools for the recorded conference sessions for one school year to the end of May 28, 2021. Of everything that I've read here, that was the most important one to me. I mean, we obviously would like to be in, where we were person to person. However, if there's anything better than that, is being able to have a video recording or some type of recording of that so they can go back and revisit those. So that's good. And that's what I'm looking at here is an entire year. So that's great. Conference will occur on July the 22nd and 23rd of 2020 It will be virtual on the Zoom platform. This training follows District Goal 3, which is increasing achievement scores and reaching AMOs, targets, and Goal 4, training effective teachers and district instructional leaders and instructional coaches, and will disperse the training into each of their schools. Now, I will call to your attention that in item 14, if we cancel, and this was something of contention, if we cancel this virtual conference, we are obligated, after we give them 60 days notice, we are obligating of paying them a contractual fee for breaking that contract of $164,585, excuse me, and this total Title II expenditure of, I'm assuming this would come out of our, what title would this come out of, Mr. Gullion? If 2, and an additional 24,000 after that. So we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of about $190,000, something like that.
So motion 13 would be, we right now have a contract for $165,000 that this board approved back in January for us to have the in-person. If SD is not doing in-person, they're only doing virtual conferences. Mr. Goyen and Ms. Lehman, our new PD specialist, did an amazing job negotiating, so maybe we need them for negotiators. They were able to get SD to agree to give us, as Mr. Sprock mentioned, access to their content, even though the presenters necessarily didn't want to, and they also got them to come down on the cost. So option 13 would be for us to have the virtual conference. It's $150,000 instead of $164,000, so they've come down almost $15,000. If we choose not to do that, then we would be held to their 15% cancellation fee for canceling the original conference that we had at $164,000. So it would be $150,000 or $24,000.
Okay, so we're $150,000 if we did the virtual conference.
Correct.
And then $164,585 if we cancel.
We'd be only $24,687 if we canceled.
Okay.
15% of the original.
15% of the original. So we can pay almost $25,000 for nothing, or we can get the virtual conference, which includes a year archiving of this staff development for $150,000. Is that correct?
Correct, and what'll be useful for our teachers, now that we're back with our change in our calendars, them needing to have 12 hours of in-service, our principals and coaches can now assign this that we have access to for the rest of the year.
Right, that's good. Normally what we do get into teachers have to, usually they get 3, we do have 3 at the beginning or some throughout the year that they do during our regular calendar, and then they're charged with the responsibility of getting 2 additional days throughout the year. Now, some of them, it's a challenge. Quite frankly, it is a challenge. So what this does, as Dr. Sullivan talked about, is this provides us an opportunity to archive those things. Not only is it give them a chance to go back and get those professional development, but a lot of this professional development is high-quality professional development. So we can specifically assign that to a teacher in an area that they may have a deficiency in. And I would agree that this is a pretty good contract.
This is quite a bit cheaper than what we spent last year in it. What, 150, 200,000 cheaper? I like that. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. 15.
All right, financial matters. Stewart's Creek High School Dugout Booster Club Indoor Batting Facility request found on tab 6. The Stewart Creek High School Dugout Booster Club are asking for permission from the Rutherford County Schools to build a 100 by 60 indoor hitting facility on the campus of Stewart's Creek High. This project will be paid entirely through the Stewart's Creek High School Dugout Booster Club with no construction cost to the Rutherford County School Board, and will be financed with an unsecured loan from Wilson Bank and Trust that the Dugout Booster Club has secured. This project supports 2 school-sponsored sports, softball and baseball teams, and meets all the Title IX equity criteria. Planned renderings of the project are attached. All yearly, quarterly, and monthly advertising donations and sponsorships that are collected will be deposited in a debt retirement account at Wilson Bank and Trust, in which the yearly principal payment will be made. The Booster Club's yearly financial contribution to this heating facility project will be paid quarterly to the Wilson Bank and Trust. Once the project is approved by the school board's purchasing department will release a formal bid request for the project based on the specifications as outlined in the written request of the Booster Club. The sealed bids will be opened at the school central office a week later. It is stressed that this is the Booster Club's bid and that the school purchasing department is only facilitating the bid process as the facility becomes donated school asset at the end of the construction. Bid will be awarded to the lowest and best proposal that meets bid specifications.
Any questions? Okay. Let's move on, general purpose school amendment.
All right, this is an amendment from our Fund 141, just moving around money. This amendment moves $177,500 in already budgeted pay and $30,726 in related benefits for a total of $208,226 in the classified hourly staff to the budget lines items where it's needed. Most of these funds are coming from regular ed EAs and bus aides, which were used to cover SPED and alternative school EAs. Other items in the amendment cover implementation of the new attendance system and changes due to the experience approved for new employees. Once again, this is money just moved around that's already been budgeted.
Any questions on that? All right, let's move on. Number 3.
All right, number 3, what we're going to, Mr. Bodery is going to do is we brought forth the original budget that we were looking at, and he went over the revenues, and he went over the expenditures, and at that time, I think we were like a little over 20 million upside down on our budget. When you look at 20 million in terms of what it can impact on our ending fund balance, I think at that time, and still, we found that to be kind of a little problematic. But what he's going to do tonight, we did get a May estimate of our BEP funding. It was up about 185,000. Wished it was up more than that, but it was 185,000. And what he's going to do is going to go over our revenues that we currently have. He'll take a look at our state revenues that we'll get, and he'll look at our local. And then we'll look at what it looks like and some suggestions on what, and just in case if we have to do some cutting. I will tell you that, we all know that local sales tax is we've heard about the dire straits of our local sales tax. We did get in our, we got our March estimate, which comes around about this time. And we won't get an April, sometime 1st of June or something like that, late June or middle of June. And but Mr. Bodery does have some a good insight on where we were in terms of projections from where we were last year. And I think as we look at this sales tax revenue, local sales tax revenue, you gotta look at where we are and look where we can go, and I think he'll do a great job of explaining where we are.
Got several handouts in front of you. Before we touch on that, I just want to speak real quick about what Mr. Spurlock's talking about with the local option sales tax. Of course, that was a lot of conversation that we had when we looked at the revenue originally for the next fiscal year budget, and also how we're going to fare as we go through the end of this fiscal year. Like Mr. Spurlock said, the funds that came into the trustee office today, the county trustee office, from the state, it would be the sales tax that was collected from the tills of the merchants here locally in March. And of course, that was as we were going into the shutdown in about the middle of March. We expect to see a decrease in local revenues, especially sales tax, in traditional businesses. The state April revenue report came out, and of course that made some pretty good headlines saying, it was down substantially. Some of the items that caused them to be off in April was the state allowed for several types of taxes that was due in April, like hall income tax, franchise and excise tax payments, business tax, motor vehicle registrations. They actually, they said these are still due, but we are going to defer when it has to be filed. July, that's right, on those. And for the F&E, or I'm sorry, the hall income tax. But there was, for all those taxes, the taxpayer was given, just like the IRS is given for federal income tax, the state gave a window to allow people to file at a later date because of the COVID illness and the shutdown. So when we got the sales tax in, or we got the report today of those March sales, there was a lot of talk of it's going to be a lot lower for local option sales tax. Well, we found that what we received, and this was the March collections, was actually for the schools was 2.9% more than for the stuff that came from this same month collections last fiscal year. So we're still looking at, to date, we're 4.51% over the collections from last year, sales tax collections, local option, and still a little bit above the budget. We're around 3% growth that we were budgeting for sales tax. So does that mean that's going to hold constant for the next 2 months because of what we just went through? I guess we'll find out. But Lisa Nolan and I had a good discussion about this. We had been looking at the online sales tax. Of course, last year, the state acted on that Supreme Court ruling saying that, the out-of-state businesses that do not have a brick-and-mortar presence within the state, they're now required, if they do over $500,000 in taxable sales in Tennessee, they are required to remit that sales tax to Tennessee, including the local option. So I believe that we're starting to see in the last few months the benefit of that change in Tennessee revenue law, where we're now seeing a lot of the online sales, along with them guiding back sales to where they occurred. And it used to be that a lot of the sales on the online would go to, like if it was a city and a zip code, like Murfreesboro has, if you got a zip code for Murfreesboro, you could be outside the city limits where the sale was occurring, and the city of Murfreesboro would receive that sales tax. Now, because they've got, it's called a cookie nexus, and what that is when you order something online, it puts a cookie, and I'm sure the IT guys could talk about that all day long, but they now have software that they can trace where that sale's coming from, so then you can put the sales tax for the local option sales tax back to the CITUS code at the State Department of Revenue for where the sale's occurring, being unincorporated Rutherford County or City of Murfreesboro or Laverne. So I believe that's obviously a benefit to what we're seeing in the revenue, the sales tax, whereas a traditional brick and mortar business not doing online sales, it's been shuttered. And I use restaurant. Yes, they've been doing curbside service, but yes, they're also shuttered, for dining in. The online sales, along with other things that were open, grocery stores, things like that, obviously that offset this for the sales tax to actually come in March. Now, what we see next month remains to be seen.
I think historically, if you looked back at the previous year, you and I talked about that, there are spikes. This is one, getting into May and in the summer, that's where we had historically seen some of our greater increase. Is that not correct?
We saw in last fiscal year, 18-19, they saw for the county schools, I believe it was around 5%.
Right.
From the year prior to that.
Prior year.
So, yeah, so we're...
I think to sum it up, we're not as bad as we thought were or we're going to be, but we probably aren't as good as we could have been.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm sure we could say, I mean, that, without a doubt, I mean, shutdown impacted.
I think the biggest concern would be, where will we be come after we've already set our budget?
Exactly.
No one has a crystal ball.
I wish I did.
And I think that's where the caution comes in.
Exactly.
Now, I would agree with you. I think maybe there was a jump to, a rush to judgment. But I do think we would be naive not to think that there's going to be some type of impact. How bad it will be, I don't think anyone really knows. But I do think with what we've seen today, I mean, you can kind of, of course, in Rutherford County, spring fling should be going on right now. I mean, we would have had everybody everywhere, and that's a lot of money generated. Now, I think you talked about restaurants. They do curbside, but I saw where on an average 30% of their sales are in the dining room areas, and I don't know if you could duplicate that, because usually if you're like me, you might get dessert or something like that. You might stay around there a while and spend a little bit more money. I don't know. But I think, that's a starting point. I think it's a positive thing.
I feel better of where we're being conservative with the sales tax right now with our estimate for next year. And I feel, and like I said, we had this conversation last time, Mr. Jordan and I were talking about it. Just, I wrestle and think a lot about it, about where we're at, but we have to have a starting point with that sales tax estimate. But going forward, I just wanted to let you know about that with the sales tax what came in on for the March collections. In front of you, you've got, and we reviewed this, something similar to this, when we were working with the budget, putting the budget together, and that's your revenue spreadsheet. I was wanting to go through that with you. The only difference than what was approved was, like Mr. Sparlock said, our May estimate came in for BEP, so that increased by $185,000 more for BEP. What I added to this since the last time that we reviewed it was the next two rows, the next two columns. It's got a percentage of all revenue. I wanted to let you see, what percentage each of our revenues was in comparison to the total revenues that we're budgeting. So as you can see at the very bottom of the second page, we have the revenue that we currently have budgeted for the general purpose school fund. It's $408,033,345. And once again, that's the only difference between the last time we looked at the revenue was that small increase in the BP between the April and the May BP estimate. If we go up on the first page, and we'll just walk through this, there's county property taxes. On that 21%, it shows percent of all revenues. That $87,603,513 for total county property tax, that amounts to 21% of that total revenue bottom line number, the $408 million that makes up the estimated revenue for the 141 fund. So you can see 21% of the general purpose school fund's revenue comes from county property tax. Now the next column over, the 54%, that is the county property tax makes up 54% of total local taxes, which is that $161,356,957 number. So that's 54% of our local taxes. Right below that is the local option sales tax. You see the 16% of that we have budgeted, $66,885,000 for local option sales tax, which we conservatively budgeted, just below what we had slightly below what we had for this original budget for sales tax for this fiscal year. That makes up 16% of the total revenue budget for the general purpose school fund. Moving over to the next, it makes up 41% of the total local taxes. Wheel tax, there's a lot of discussion about wheel tax, and, that I wanted you to see. The $4,350,464, that makes up 1% of our total revenue budget.
If I can jump in there real quick, and one of the things, you look at the two major ones, 95%, you got your local option sales tax capped already. And, I think we've been capped for a long time, have we not, 15 years or so?
Yes, sir. It's been several years since they went to the maximum for local option. And then, of course, the business tax, the $2,327,980, that makes up rounded 1%. And of all local revenues and the percent of the local taxes. The local option mixed drink tax, it's less than half of 1% of our total revenue, so I just omitted it. So that shows you, as you scroll down and include the other local revenues, it comes down to the $163,274,327 amount, and that makes up approximately 40% of the funding for the general purpose school fund. Moving down, you see our BEP estimate right from our May estimates, including a $2 million for growth funds. Is as we've grown over 1,000 students this year, ADM, we expect, conservatively we should meet the $2 million additional. So I added that to the May estimate, and that was the same amount I added we had for growth BEP funds in the April when we looked at this before. That BEP funding makes up 58% of our general purpose school fund budget for revenue. When you add the additional state revenues, including like we talked about the last time, the $2.3 million in state revenue sharing from the TVA, we wind up with 60% of our revenue for our budget in the general purpose school fund coming from state of Tennessee funds, including the BEP. Moving down, we have federal, the majority of our federal grant funding is in, of course, in the federal projects fund, separate from the general purpose school fund. So what is included in the in the general purpose school fund for federal revenue is, of course, the IDA money of $550,000, and we have ROTC reimbursement of $680,000 for a total of $1,230,000 of budgeted federal revenue in the general purpose school fund, which makes up less than half of 1%. And moving down, we see that comes up to the 100% of the $408,033,345 that we've got budgeted originally for revenue in the general purpose school fund. I just wanted to show you the breakout, the percentage of each of our revenue streams and how it impacts the bottom line on that revenue for that fund. Okay. Any questions on this? We'll move on. Okay. The next that I have in front of you, we have two different budgets. One is the one that was reviewed and approved by the school board on the 27th of April, and that includes a 2% pay increase for the classified and certified employees, as well as a 5% increase for the bus contractors for theirs. And I've summarized on this sheet right here in front of you, this is just a brief summary, so instead of having you guys move from back and forth between the budgets and the revenue that I just walked through, I wanted you to see these two different budgets that I've got in front of you. You have right there, you have the first column, the April 27th, 2020 proposed budget for the general purpose school fund. There's the $408,033,345 of estimated revenue that we just went through. Below that is your estimated revenues for the 2% increase for the employees and the 5% for the contractors, the bus contractors, and that gives a bottom line total of expenditures of $427,957,837. You have above the revenue is our estimated assigned and unassigned beginning fund balance as of July 1, 2020. So that is what we're estimating at this moment, what the beginning fund balance at the beginning of this next fiscal year will be as we close out this fiscal year. That, of course, I'm working with Lisa Nolan to make sure that fund balance that you see right there for July 1, that estimated fund balance, that is exactly what the county commissions, the budget committee is looking at right now. So the number I'm giving you is what they're looking at. So everyone's on the same page here. So we're looking at a beginning fund balance, assigned and unassigned, which means that's not restricted money on a grant money or donated money that has to be spent for anything specific. This is funding that you, as a school board and the county commission, can use to balance a budget. And that is $39,045,233. Then you add the revenue, estimated revenues that we just discussed. You subtract the estimated expenditures, and you arrive at an estimated ending assigned, unassigned fund balance at June 30th, 2021 of $19,120,741. And that breaks down to a 4.47% percentage of assigned, unassigned ending fund balance compared to total estimated expenditures. That gives a budgeted deficit of $19,924,492. Now, that leaves, that is like Mr. Pollock said, that digs into our fund balance close to $20 million. And with that said, we prepared a second budget for your review, and that is the second one that's in front of you in detail with this. The only thing that has changed in that budget is two items, and that is instead of a 2%, it would be a 1.5% increase for the employees, and also a 1.5% same amount for the bus contractors increase. And I've had several people ask me about why do we have a pay increase in this budget? And my answer is because as of May, the May estimate that we just received in BEP, the governor's budget that the General Assembly has approved before they recessed has the 2% increase in there for the salaried certified personnel. So that is still in our budget.
He did come out today, however, and I think this is something we can be cognizant of. He did come out today that all things were on the table, including, he didn't come out and say raises, but he mentioned all things, and I would assume that would be. Now, if that occurs, that would occur, I'd say, early in June, as soon as they come back.
It's true.
That is also down from the 4% that he had promised originally, right?
Right.
So, I mean, he has cut already, and there's a possibility it's going to get cut even more, but there has been some cuts already made. On this second proposed budget, for your consideration, it's a 1.5% employee and bus contractor increase. As you can see, same exact estimated beginning fund balance, same exact revenue that we just went through. We have a decrease from $427 million to $425,834,328 for expenditures, leaving an estimated June 30th, 2021 assigned unassigned fund balance of $21,244,250
and that's just under a 5% ending fund balance estimated, with a budget deficit dropping to $17,800,983.
And that is approximately $95,000 more than we did last year.
This current fiscal year, yes, with the
Fiscal year,
yes.
that's correct, $95,000 more. And that's in taking in consideration that we've added an additional 1,000 students.
1,030.
And overall increase with this second one here, overall percentage increase from 2019-20 to fiscal year 2020-2021, less than 2%. Am I correct?
1.8%.
Okay.
Any questions?
This question I've got, now we went over all this, are we gonna vote on something Thursday in regards to this, or is that what you're looking for?
I'd say that what we will do is, I think that would be a recommendation on Thursday. Or do you want to bring, or do we want to bring both of them forward on the 26th meeting? I mean, I think that's up to the board. The reason why we went back and took a look at this is I agree that, I don't think there's any fat in it at all. I'll be honest with you, I thought that was a pretty good one, but I think when you look at a 1.8% increase, now I know we've been getting a lot of flack about raises and stuff like that. If the governor keeps this in his budget, we're already using some to offset the cost of insurance, because we meet the minimum salary. Is that correct?
That's great. Yes, sir.
So my thing on that, and I get it, I do get that. We're competing with other systems now. We have one system I will not name said that they're not giving raises, and they didn't give raises, but they changed the salary structure. So if you change the salary structure, someone's getting more money. I always call that a raise. I guess we could start calling it, we're changing the salary structure, but anyway. And I definitely think, I know, our teachers have worked hard during this time. Our classified people have been very, I went by this morning and saw some people working, and I've been very pleased with what's going on. And it's a difficult task keeping good people, and when you look at the probably the average, and I looked at that, you're talking about $1,300 to $1,400 a year average raise. Divide that over 12 months, and there you go.
Anyone else?
I know when the governor talked about the 4% increase for teachers, educators, and it was just, my goodness, just a few days till he was back on TV. I want to say it was like 10 days. And I'm not adding Governor Lee. I'm fine with Governor Lee, I guess. But he was talking about some adjustments and whatever, and the first thing he mentioned was teachers. Go from 4% to 2%. And I remember thinking to myself, well, good. The teachers get to pay for it again. That was something that I did think about, but 1.5% increase is it's better than zero, I suppose, but it's a little embarrassing in a way, but so is 2%, for that matter. So I don't know. I don't know what else we can do. I really looked at this as close as I could in the last couple of days, and of course I didn't have all the figures, but and I want to agree with one thing for sure that the director just said, and we haven't talked about this at all. If there's fat or unreasonable things in this budget, I don't see it. Now, it may be there somewhere, maybe somebody can ferret it out, but I believe it's pretty solid. I think we probably, my opinion would be that on the, is that 26, is that when we meet?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we meet again on Thursday. And I think it would behoove us to come up with a proposal and present it. One thing. But if you want to give them some options, that's fine too.
I think you may be right. I think, I think there's going to be plenty of discussion on 177, Fund 177. I think there'll be a lot of discussion on that. I think that, that we present this with this 1.5% across the board. It's less, 1.8% increase over this fiscal year here. I don't know. I don't see how, Doug and I went back and looked at it, and we looked at last year. We're talking about $95,000, difference between when we went into our in-fund balance last year. We anticipate 1,000 more kids, coming in this year or more. We also, there's some things that we'll be doing. I'll talk about here in a few minutes, but with the CARES Act money, what we'll be doing with that, that will, to provide more opportunities for our students. But I think I agree with you, Mr. Jordan. I think put that one forward and see what happens.
Well, and we need to, I think it's sort of our duty here, maybe, and everybody may not look at it this way, but that anything that the school system, that we think the school system needs, and it could be a building or whatever it might be, and we know that eventually we're going to have to do it. When we put it off a year, 2 years, whatever, which we're doing here, which we've got to do here. I don't know that there's any other way, but when you do that, it's going to cost more the next time around, and these things do not stop, as Mr. Lee has continually reminded us that his list of things that are going to need considerable attention now, they don't go away just because the school year ends. It'll just be tacked on to next year with some additional items that we'll need because the school system's a year older and the roof is a year older, right? I'm right, I think. Just say I'm right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, move on to number 4 down there. The extra
Get back over to
limit day for classified.
Yes, number 4, additional 1-hour inclement weather day for classified hourly employees in the fiscal year 2020-2021 from the general purpose school fund budget. This was, in what we've had in previous years. We have 11 inclement weather days for our certified and 6 for our classified. Now, fortunately, until this year, and maybe 5 or 6 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we've never had this come up. We did check around with some of our local. I think it ranged anywhere from 8 to 10. I think it was, and I think a good suggestion is how to make this where we can make it equitable over time. And we added one additional one there. It says currently the school board has 6 inclement weather days budgeted in the proposed fiscal year 2020-21 general purpose school fund budget. The cost to add 1 additional inclement weather day for an hourly non-12-month classified employees If the school year was extended an additional makeup day, this would require additional budgeted funding of $135,900 in the fiscal year 2020-2021. So in other words, if we surpass that 11 days that we currently have, if we surpass that, then we would have to have that additional funding in order to make up. Am I correct on that? For every day.
Correct. If the school year got extended,
Right.
that's when we would see the impact, that we would need a budget amendment for that.
So basically what is he saying, you know, if we went over 12 days, then we would have to, of course, the teachers would make up that day, okay? Now, if the teachers made up that day, you realize the classified would be there also.
Yeah, so this would provide, with right now, they have 6 that we're looking at, for 6 for the classified. This would bring them up to the 7, and like you said, in the last few years, this year barring, there's only been 1 year that we went over the allocated days for the classified, and it was 1 day, it was that 7th day. So this would add that
Would add it,
extra day.
and going forward, we would look at adding one or two, depending on the budget year, so that they could get up to the same number of days. Is that correct?
That'd be a good plan, yes, sir.
Okay, any questions on that?
I like the recommendation. I think this is something that's been an injustice for a long time, and it's a step in the right direction to fix a problem. So anytime we can fix a problem, I think we need to do it. Good situation, fixing that issue.
I agree. Hey, let's see here. Ready for Smyrna Elementary School.
Yeah, Smyrna Elementary School lease, found on tab 8 for information only. The town of Smyrna currently maintains a lease with the Rutherford County School System for property located behind Smyrna Elementary School for recreational use. Under the lease, the town of Smyrna may renew the terms of the additional year upon written notice to the board. The town of Smyrna has chosen to exercise the renewal and has met the required timelines. The lease shall be renewed for additional year with 1 remaining opportunity renewal prior to a new agreement being necessary.
Any questions on that? I'll have to say the town of Smyrna's helped us quite a few times over the years. They work with us well. So I think that's a good thing. Insurance update.
Everybody should have received an email this morning waiving the 3 points that's necessary for the January through December 2021 deduction. So we don't have to worry about getting our 3 points, but then when October 1st rolls around, we'll be working on the 2022 school year, getting that reduction. So for this next upcoming insurance, we do not have to do the 3 points for the reduction.
Thank you, ma'am. Director's update.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about the CARES Act. We've been allocated 4.4. You want to come on up and talk about it, Mr. Gullion?
So we're still waiting for some clarity from the State Department. As of this morning when I checked, the application is going to be open on May 26th, with districts having to submit an application by June 15th. And then June 30, the goal would be for the State Department to approve those allocations so that we could spend those funds. As far as the CARES Act is concerned, we can spend back through March 13th, which will be a nice.
And go forward to almost 2022 sometime.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And one of the things, normally when you get federal money, there's some stipulations that's always attached. One of them being, supplanting and how what percentage expenditures and so forth. There's no strings on this.
Correct. That's what.
And it is determined by our at-risk population. That's correct.
Correct. Yes, sir. Based on that Title 1A allocation.
Right. And there was a little consternation, and I get it when Governor Lee mentioned that they would go along with providing funding for our private institutions within our county.
One of the things I will mention to you is that this funding, we're going to be using it for all students. Okay, in our digital platform, we'll be using it for all students. You want to give us a ballpark figure on how much we're looking at in order allocating to some of our private institutions around here?
Yes, sir. So basically, and this is based on, we got some conflicting information from the State Department as far as our private schools is concerned and what Mr. Spurlock alluded to there. Initially, it was based on Title I funding and families that live in poverty, which we don't have a lot with our private schools in Rutherford County. But now we've sent an intent to participate form to all of our private schools in Rutherford County that meet certain qualifications. So we have 9. I have heard back from 6 of those schools, and 3 have sent back that they intend to participate. The funding formula, if you will, is on a proportionate amount, so it'll be based on those 3 schools' student totals, which actually, from what I see right now, is less than 500 students, and it's based on our 48,000 plus students in Rutherford County schools. So it won't be a huge portion of that $4.4 million, but it's called equitable services that we do have to provide for them.
Probably less than 100,000.
Yes, sir. Less than 100,000 for sure. Yes, sir. Based on the Title II allocation that we have this year, they got about 20,000 amongst the 4 schools that did participate, but only 3, it looks like right now, participate in CARES Act. I suspect it'll be somewhere around 60,000, maybe a little less.
So we would have
The remaining.
4.3
Yes, sir.
if that went to that 4.3 million. That's now I will say that on the 4.3 million that we're using, this is for everyone. This is not any personnel. We're limiting some of the recurring costs. One of the big items on there is our virtual school.
Correct.
And what we will recoup that cost with our ADM that we will collect from those that enroll in it. And I think currently, what's our interest level now in numbers? More than we can handle?
I would say within the first 2 weeks, we had more than we're looking at anticipating just opening with 100, and we'll be well over that cap, I imagine, as soon as we launch.
And just to remind you that we, as of whatever March this year, we had 1,600 students that were on being homeschooled. We've done a survey and got back, I think it was like quite a bit. There was some interest level there. And we actually, I hope we get those that are in Robertson County now. I hope we get them back. We need to make sure whoever they are and get them back here.
We'd love to get our 300 students that are living here and going to their online school back. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
How many responses did you say we got back?
We sent just to our home school, and our initial, within the first 2 weeks, got back 58 responses from them about their interest level.
50?
58. And then we've had, I'd have to look and see how many emails we sent out exactly, but now, of course, the turn has been looking at with COVID. I'm interested in my student looking at virtual, so now we're not just looking at homeschool, it's both. So we're getting 2 to 3 calls a day on that potential as well.
Yeah, one other thing, we have been working on, our group, working on school opening. It's involved, it's about everybody in here and in some that aren't here, okay? And we've got our plans together in case of what may come down. I know when we started looking at social spacing, Mr. Lee I just about fell out. I said, what? You know, we went through, we took our capacity of our schools, we looked at that in terms of what that would look like if we did an A/B and then supplemented with a virtual on the days that they weren't in school. I felt a little better about that, and then we got to the transportation part of it. He says, we got most of our average buses carry 95, and you can comfortably social distance on there, put 15 on there. Then we start doing the math, and we come up with a bill of over $12 million, and I said, what? So we're going to go back to the drawing board, Mr. Lee, on that right there.
Yeah, he said I didn't get a smiley sticker that day. My report card didn't look good.
But the point being, the Instructional Department, everyone, Dr. Anthony, Mr. Beaudry, we've all been working on that. Hopefully, we do hope, people, we want to be back in school. I think everyone wants to be back in school. And hopefully something, I know Ms. Page has done a great job with sending out the guidance because we will be opening June the 1st for our athletics and extracurricular activities with guidelines. And she did a fabulous job there after I told her it's too wordy, cut it down, and she brought it back to me and it was perfect. So thank you, Ms. Page. We also, I met with the, not Head Start, help me out, the after school. YMCA, met with them last week. They're going to be going back in their schools. It's going to be smaller crowds, obviously, and I'm really appreciative of that because it's really been a burden on some of our parents. So I do appreciate them doing that, and I think this will alleviate some of the anxiety that will occur just naturally. And so I'm really appreciative of getting our YMCA back up and going.
Okay, thank you.
Just go back to what you alluded to just a minute ago, and I'll just take a guess and we'll see. If you took Oakland High School and you go back at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you go 8 to 3 with their student enrollment, and you social distance them during that 8 to 3, I'm going to assume that that's impossible. You couldn't do it. Would that be fair?
You mean a full
day?
No, sir.
One shift only?
No, sir.
You just don't have enough room?
Well, your problem becomes to social distance, and I'm speaking for Mr. Spurlock, but one of the large problems is the cafeteria.
Right.
Because to feed all of those children in 3 or 4, and they're young adults, but 3 or 4 hours, you're running them through there, and you've been there, it looks like a cattle chute. I mean, you're cramming them in there as fast as you can go, and they got 30 minutes to eat. At best, you're going to have to cut it in half, and probably more than that. And you don't have, I don't see how time frame, how you get them through there.
There's a lot.
I tried to put that on paper, and I realized, I thought
stuff.
It just really couldn't be done.
We went through a lot, and we're still working. And by the way, guys, we're meeting again Friday, so we're working on that thing. I've been traveling around the schools, different schools, and as I go around, I see this just something just jumps out at me. I see these groups of kids, and they're all playing together. I didn't see any social distancing going on, so I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, I had an email on this topic, and I didn't answer it yet. I will, but I just put it on what I thought was a reasonable thing. And of course, when you get if you take all the classes at Oakland High School, and it could be any high school, but Oakland High School, and you split them, and you've got 15 in a room, let's just say, and then, so you've created another classroom somewhere. Well, and you do that all over the building every period. Well, you got to hire somebody to teach them, which would be millions across this county.
And that's where we talked about doing the A-B thing. If it came to that, one group would go on Mondays, one group would go on Tuesdays, and then we'd leave Friday. I think we left that as either alternating or virtual. I can't remember what it was, but we got a plan. We hope we don't have to use the plan. We'll continue tweaking the plan. Here's the main thing that you get out of the plan. It's going to cost more money that we don't have.
We have reached out to a couple other counties around us, or at least I have. And I know everybody else is too. What everybody's finding very quickly is nobody can financially sustain the transportation side of it. The education side, don't get me wrong, it's not easy. And by any stretch of the imagination being creative, but what everybody's and in the director of schools, Williamson County, said it the other night, the very first thing out of his mouth is, we're looking for it, but you can't do transportation. You can't, nobody can pay for it. If the budget for this year is $19 million, our estimate right now to run it like what we're looking at is 12. So 19 plus 12.
We don't have 12 million. You're 2/3 of the budget to try and do it. Nobody can do it. So, I mean, that's where I lost my sticker.
I know. Brownie.
All right. Ms. Johnson, you got anything from Tennessee Legislative?
Nothing this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Sharp, Federal?
Not tonight, but I will try to follow up some, the CARES Act, because I was going to talk about that Thursday night anyway. Thank you for bringing it up. So I'll give a little bit of an update on that.
Fine, thank you. General discussion, I've got one thing, is I want to make sure everybody listening to us knows that on the 26th of this month, we'll be meeting at the historic courthouse on the square. So
5:30?
5:30, okay. I was going to be there at 5 o'clock. I'm glad you told me that. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could, not to put Mr. Evans on the spot, but I know we've had some zone exceptions. The window for that has opened. Do you have a count on that?
As far as the number that we've received,
Did you have received this far?
I can have it for you Thursday. We extended the deadline to May 15th, which was Friday. And I would have to go, some of them are still in the process because the way it works now, they're online. The parents had to submit them by Friday, but then the principals have to recommend in favor or against. And some of those are still flowing to me, so I don't have a total number yet, but I can get a good ballpark number for you by Thursday.
Yeah, that's fine. I just kind of want to, because I know last year we had a lot of them that we met on, and just kind of wanted to.
As far as appeals for the board, I won't have that by Thursday yet because the appeals are ongoing right now, and they have to request those. We currently have about 4 or 5 that I think may be appeals, but it's a little early to tell.
And Mr. Spurlock, some parents are wondering about already assigned numbers for the schools for graduation. Can you give us an update on the graduation?
When we gave the guidelines to our principals, and that's a school-based decision. A lot of them have more room than others, you know.
And that's what I had said.
What I would do, have them reach
school
out
does
to the
their.
principal.
Yeah, okay. So there really hasn't been anything set in
No.
stone yet.
And that's going to be, like I said, once again, based on the individual schools and the space that they have in order to do social spacing. And of course, you know, I think Dixon County may be doing theirs here soon, or anyway, but you know, to make sure that we understand that, you know, if a family of 4 comes in and they can sit in a confined pace, I mean, that's fine. I mean, we're not going to have all 4 of them spread out.
Sure.
And I think the ones that are doing it in the stadiums are going to have, they can address at least 4, I would say.
Thank you. I told them that I would ask.
Okay. Anyone else?
One thing the governor brought up, and I think Ms. Sharp sent out some literature today, and the director just talked about it a minute ago, and I'll just pass this along, and that is that everything with the state budget was on the table to discuss. And he quoted that, and that is, in fact, a quote. But, of course, the first thing I thought of, and maybe you too, was that, well, if we just did away with this silly voucher program, which they don't want to call it that, of course, we would have an automatic $25 million that the governor wanted to start 1 year early, which was a bad mistake on his part. If he just left it alone, he had his way. But that wasn't good enough. Well, okay, anyway, $25 million, that's on the table. I talked to a member of the state legislature today. Of course, they're not in session. They don't go back for a couple of weeks. And she told me to watch closely and see how all the contortions they go through to avoid bringing that up again and have any motions or anything else on it. And the reason she gave me, quoting her now, is they're afraid that it won't pass again. And I think I can assure you, I think that it wouldn't pass again, because right now it's state law. Would it pass by 1 vote? 1. And we know how we got that vote.
Hold the vote
Oh.
open.
Just something to think about. Maybe that's 25 million will come from that. I don't know. I doubt it, but it might.
Anyone else? There's nothing else. We're adjourned.